Did you know that most animals in the zoo are unhappy? For those of you who have gone to a zoo, have you noticed that many of the animals looked bored, sad, and even depressed? I used to love going to the zoo until recently when I went to visit a zoo in Washington, D.C. I couldn't help but notice these animals were still. Rarely did they move unless they were eating. I was with my friend Kyle at the time, and we were at the tiger cage, which is my favorite animal. I remember mentioning to him how the tiger was just sitting there. It seemed so lifeless. On top of that, there was only one tiger in the cage. How lonely that tiger must be. To this day, that tiger could still be there, all alone. There's a short story of a giraffe I found from Stefan Anitai off the Softpedia website. This giraffe was a part of the Paris Zoo, and it died. Animal behavioralists and zoologists said that it broke its head intentionally by hitting it against the walls of its shelter. Can you imagine a giraffe just hitting its head over and over until it died? The behaviorists said this was due to the sadness and depression levels, which had drastically risen since the animal was caged in. Here are a few pictures of animals in cages at the zoo. Their faces show boredom, depression, and loneliness. They don't have the space to run around and feel like they're free. I'm here to propose to you why animals would do better and should be in wildlife sanctuaries rather than zoos, because they offer more space and a better life, while people are still able to view and learn about the animals. So let's talk about zoos. Most people think of zoos as a fun, happy, and educational place where people can learn about animals and perhaps enjoy some family time as well. While this is true for the people, for the animals, however, zoos create psychological disorders that these animals can become depressed from. Most animals are used to roaming for miles every day. However, in zoos, these animals are usually kept in small cages, and they don't have the space to roam around. They have to spend every day of their life in these tiny cages. Doesn't that just seem awful? Think about it this way. What if you were placed in a small cage with nowhere to go and had to spend every day of your life in there? How would that make you feel? Wanda Embar of the Vegan Peace Foundation visited her local zoo, the Milwaukee County Zoo. She wrote about how her experience was horrible and that there were certain stress signs one can pick up from watching the animals. Zoologists have coined a term for stress signs, zoochosis. Some of these stress signs include pacing backwards and forwards, head bobbing, rocking, repeatedly retracing their steps, sitting motionless, or biting themselves. Embar states how some zoos actually give their animals tranquilizers and antidepressants to hide their behavior problems. She also states that the reason animals are so depressed is not only because of the small cages, but also because these animals don't get enough physical activity, mental stimulation, and rarely have any privacy. Some animals are used to hunting, but when they're kept in zoos, they lose the mental stimulation of hunting for food. Instead, their food is fed to them, which can lead to boredom. As stated before, most animals are used to roaming miles every day. When they're kept in small enclosures, these animals don't get the physical activity they need in order to stay healthy physically and mentally. Animals also have a lack of privacy, with people coming every day to see them. The feeling of being suffocated by people all around you, waving, shouting, and taking pictures can tend to be nerve-wracking. Amy Whiting writes an article titled, "What's Wrong with Zoos?" In it, she discusses the problem with zoos' conservation claim, and how zoos have difficulty reintroducing bred animals into the wild because they were born captive and have not learned the instincts from their formerly wild parents, and most of them cannot survive in the wild. She also talks about the flaws with their education claim. She states that zoos are really teaching that it's okay for humans to lock up animals. She also states that zoos significantly change an animal's behavior. She says that animals in zoos are merely shadows of their wild counterparts. Thus, people are not fully learning about the animals. She also talks about how most zoo enclosures are about 100 times smaller than their natural habitat. She says that confining animals in these cages is stressful and causes them to be bored and depressed. This causes them to show their stress through the stress signs that were mentioned previously: swaying, pacing back and forth, motionlessness, etc. So what's a better way for animals to live where they have space and people can still come observe these species? There are places called wildlife sanctuaries, also known as animal reserves, wildlife reserves, and wild animal parks. Wildlife sanctuaries don't cage up animals in small enclosures. Instead, these animals have a greater amount of land to roam around. The animals can get their needed physical activity. Also, they're with other animals and not isolated from them. This allows the animals to roam around together. Because of this, stress signs, boredom, and depression decrease. The point of wildlife sanctuaries is to keep the animals as wild as possible, but still have humans care for and check in on the animals. There are different techniques used to keep animals from becoming too familiar with humans. One technique is using puppets for feeding. This means that humans would use puppets that look like the animal they're feeding. This helps the animals to not associate humans with food. To increase mental stimulation, I think that humans can also hide food, like behind a rock or in bushes, for the animals who like to hunt for their food. They can watch from afar to make sure the animal actually gets the food. This can help keep the animals away from boredom and make their day more exciting. With the larger land, animals also have a better chance at finding some privacy. If they feel like they want some alone time, animals can walk away from the safari bus and lay somewhere off in the distance. When they're ready for more attention, they can come closer where people can see them better. I believe that animals would do better in wildlife sanctuaries. I believe that they would be happier and live a better life. I propose that we support wildlife sanctuaries and spend more money towards these sanctuaries than towards zoos. Perhaps if more money is being spent towards wildlife sanctuaries, then the popularity will bring about more of them. Maybe even some zoos could be transformed into wildlife sanctuaries. So what can you do to help? Don't forget about the animals and support your local wildlife sanctuary by donating money, so they can have more funds to help the animals and keep them happy and healthy. In some places, there might even be a volunteer opportunity. This is a great way to gain experience and show your support. Remember, animals have feelings too, and keeping them caged up to be shown off for our entertainment is not the way animals should be treated. So choose for the animals to have a better life. Choose for the happiness of these animals. Choose for the health of these animals. Choose wildlife sanctuaries.